We're live on YouTube.
Okay, I have the time being 5:30. This is the July 16th, 2020 meeting of the Board of Directors at Southeast Polk Community School District. First item is call to order and roll call. Karen?
Andy?
Here.
Fisher?
Here.
Crowell?
Here.
Nave?
Here.
Powell?
Here.
Flings?
Here.
Crab?
Here.
Nave?
Here again.
Oh, sorry.
Just checking time. All right, we are all here, so we definitely have our quorum. Item 1B is agenda adoption. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Adam. A second.
Second, Rick Powell.
Second.
Okay, thanks, Rick. Karen?
Fisher?
Yes.
Crowell?
Yes.
Nave?
Yes.
Powell?
Yes.
Slings?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Okay, the agenda is adopted. Next item is 1C, District Vision and Mission. Rick?
Southeast Polk Community School District. Learn, lead, and live. Success for college, career, and civic life. Engage all students in learning a challenging curriculum delivered through quality instruction.
Thank you, Rick. Our next item is 1D, public comments. I'm going to try to make sure I can do this, but if I get stuck in the weeds, I'm going to have Adam help me. But if there's anybody that wishes to address the board this evening on tonight's agenda items, you're welcome to do so. You'll have to type into the chat. And we'll open it up. We'll see how long this goes, if there's multiple comments, because we've got quite a few important things we need to get to. But if you would like to make any comments to the board, you can type them in, and I'll wait some time and we'll train. What we'll do is we will read them. If you have specific questions on items, you're certainly welcome to use the chat along the way. We can see them. They may not get answered, but this evening, but there's other opportunities to do that. But anyway, at this time, I would open the forum for any public comments that anybody has to make to the board.
And Gary, I'm monitoring not only the Zoom chat, I'm also looking at the YouTube chat as well for the
All right.
live feed, so.
Thank you. Our board secretary, Kevin Bacom, has indicated he's not received any requests for public comment via email. Jason, is this the kind of thing we can tell if somebody is typing or not?
I don't think so.
Okay.
There's a comment from Sarah, and I apologize if I get their last name here, Beers on the YouTube, that it's important for for all students and teachers to wear masks.
Okay. That's something Karen, who's taking our board minutes, asked me to make sure people mention their name in the chat when they type it. So thank you for including that. If anyone else is typing, please do include your name. Usually we would ask if we were meeting in person to know your address as well, where you live.
Hey, Gary,
Yes,
you can hear me. Would it be out of line if while people were typing, if they were to maybe go ahead with the meeting and then come back right before old and new business and see if there's any questions? And
I'm fine with that. So yeah, we'll, unless you've got something else coming up there, Adam, maybe that would be a wise use of our time.
Yeah, there's nothing coming up yet, but we can certainly circle back.
Okay, so if you're making a comment, please do continue to type. We'll circle back around when we finish some more of our agenda and see if there are any more public comments, and we will read those. All right, next item is 1E, consent agenda. Do I have a motion on that?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Brett. Any second?
Second.
Thanks, Chad. Any discussion or questions? All right, Karen,
Crowell,
Yes.
Nave,
Yes.
Powell,
Yes.
Slings,
Yes.
Crab,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
Fisher,
yes. All right, our next item, Roman numeral 2, old and new business. I guess I'll stop at this point. Any more comments, Adam?
Nothing new at this time.
Okay, we'll keep moving. I might check back again before we get to our last Roman numeral, but old new business, item A is confirmation of next meeting. Do I have a motion on that?
Motion to approve.
Seconded.
All right, any discussion? I guess I do have one item. I mean, we're hopeful that our next meeting would be, it will not be a Zoom meeting, but that's to be, I guess, determined depending, but we would at least at this moment plan to be back in the boardroom at that time. All right, Karen,
Nave,
Yes.
Powell,
Yes.
Slings,
Yes.
Crab,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
Fisher,
yes.
Crowell.
Yes.
All right, the next item is Roman numeral 2C, or 2B rather, I'm sorry, resolution calling for bond election. Do I have a motion?
I'm going to make the motion, but I think Kevin has something to say before I do.
All right, that's fine, Kevin.
Yeah, real quickly, I wanted to thank all the volunteers that helped with the petition signings. We needed 819 signatures in total. We received 1,251 signatures total. 85 of those were incomplete or not valid. So for nearly 1,200 signatures or 1,166 signatures, well above the required amount.
Yay.
Hard work.
Thank you to everybody that helped. Okay, I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Lori, just a second.
Okay.
Out of those signatures that weren't valid, was it just addresses not being in the district, or?
There were some that had addresses not in the district, but there are a lot of them that were incomplete. They may have just had the city down rather than just the complete home address. So we had to count those as invalid.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Laura. I'm sorry.
All right. I'd like to make the motion to approve the resolution ordering a special election on the issuance of $92 million general obligation school bonds for the September 8th, 2020 election ballot.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Is there any discussion or questions, comments? Chad?
Well, I just want to say, I think that this is a great opportunity for our district. There's a lot of good things coming up through this, and we're obviously growing, and this is I just want to say this is a big positive. So obviously it's got to go through the process, but I'm pretty excited that we're able to do this. And for all that Kevin has done too to help get us into this position where we can do it and keep taxes low. So.
Anybody else have anything? I guess I would say that I do think, as you've known from the prior meetings, I'm a little queasy about the amount, but the bottom line is we're able to do this without increasing taxes. We do certainly have needs, and we're looking out long-term, which I think is wise. And I guess one of the things that's really important to me is, yes, we've done an excellent job of getting ourselves in a financial position where we should be able to get a very good bond rate. So that's huge. We will have paid off our prior debt. You know, we had the bond referendum for the building of the new high school. That the last of that will be paid for. And so it's nice to be able to look forward and think, okay, now what's our next set of needs? And I do think we've done a good job of focusing on the classroom. All of our buildings along the way, since we built the new high school, we've put money, I think, in all the school buildings. And you know, we've got our bond position we paid the debt. We've got our bond rating in a good position because of our financial condition. And the bond market, I mean, as Lori can say, this is a good time. If you need to get debt, it's a good time to get it. So I'm glad we're looking forward. You know, we've talked about COVID's effect on all of this, but I'm glad we're moving ahead because COVID's going to come and go. But these needs, and one thing that has become more apparent to me since all this is the importance of our learning environments. And yeah, we can do it online if we need to, but there's nothing like being in school. And so I think investing in those things is wise use of our money.
And I'd like to chime in as well and say, plus in doing this and being able to hold taxes as low as we've gotten them, we're also giving the voters the opportunity to vote on what we'd like to do. So we're bringing them into the process just like we did when we built the high school and Clay Elementary. So they're part of this also.
Any other comments or questions? All right, Karen?
Howell,
Yes.
Slings,
Yes.
Crab,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Crowell,
Yes.
Nave.
Yes.
All right, the next item, Roman numeral 2C, is the 2020-21 photography contract.
Move to
Motion.
approve.
Thank you, Adam. Second.
Second.
Thanks, Rick. Any questions or discussion on that?
It's a good logical move.
Any other comments? Questions?
Thank you to Sherry Lynn for all that she does.
For
A lot
sure.
of time.
She's a big supporter of helping the district and all the students.
Yes, indeed. All right, Karen?
Slings,
Yes.
Crab,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Crowell,
Yes.
Nave,
Yes.
Powell,
Yes.
Okay, next item is Roman numeral 2D, 2020-21 school picture contract.
Move to approve.
Thanks, Tom.
Second.
Thanks, Lori. Any questions or comments on that one? Okay, Karen?
Crab,
Yes.
Handy,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Crowell,
Yes.
Nave,
Yes.
Powell,
Yes.
Slings,
Yes.
All right, next item is Roman numeral 2E, athletic training services renewal. Do I have a motion on that one?
Motion to approve.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Second.
Okay,
I beat you, Chad.
any questions or comments on that one? Tom, do you want to talk about the issue you raised?
Yeah, I just asked, with fall sports or fall activities in general being kind of a question for this year, kind of what do we do with this contract? And Jason Campbell was great. He explained that they have a really good relationship with Athletico and how valued of a partner they are. So going forward, if things were to change, we could definitely work with them on what that will look like come fall and come spring. So it's nice to hear they've been a really good partner and they have a good relationship with Jason, and they've been really good for us and to us. So it's not a massive contract, but we're just kind of looking forward to see what it would look like this fall. So, and there is a chance to kind of change that and amend that and work with us on that. So nothing I need to worry about.
Any other questions or comments on that one? Okay. Karen?
Handy,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Crowell,
Yes.
Nave,
Yes.
Powell,
Yes.
Slings,
Yes.
Crab,
Yes.
All right, our next item is Roman numeral 2F, fiscal year 21 legislative priorities. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
All right, second?
I'll second it.
Oh, okay. Any discussion on that?
I'll just chime in and say that I tabulated your responses and attached are the four top: supplemental state aid, mental health, preschool, and standards and accountability.
Hey, Dirk, I got a quick question.
You bet.
How, if you can just remind us, how close are our priorities to the rest of the state? Are we in line usually, or?
Yeah,
I mean, I
last
know
year,
there aren't a few, but
oh, sorry, I thought you were finished. Last
No,
year,
my bad.
our top four were in the top five of IASB. So we were right there with the majority.
okay, that's what I was thinking. I just couldn't remember years past. Thank you.
One of these days, I'm going to share my list, but I'm not doing it tonight. We've got enough things to discuss. I shared some of my feedback with Dirk. You know, the school board association, they always kind of channel you towards certain things. And I would add some things that probably wouldn't get anywhere, but it'd make me feel better to say them, but I'll do that another time. All right, Karen. Well, any more discussion? All right, Karen?
Fisher,
Yes.
Crowell,
Yes.
Nave,
Yes.
Powell,
Yes.
Slings,
Yes.
Crab,
Yes.
Handy,
Yes.
All right, that concludes the business meeting portion of our meeting. We're now on to Roman numeral 3, topics for discussion for the public that might be listening in. This is the part of the meeting where these items, they're not action items. They're not being voted on tonight. It's an opportunity for the board to discuss items and receive information. And so the first item, which is normally how we do this, is the superintendent's report. Dirk?
You bet. Thank you. I just have a few things and we'll reserve most of our time for the return to learn discussion. But just a reminder and an announcement and the fact that we're excited that graduation is coming up this Saturday. The good news, there's not rain in the forecast, but make sure you bring your water bottle and dress appropriately because it's supposed to be warm. So, but that will be exciting, long overdue for the class of 2020 that obviously had their spring disrupted, and this will be a good chance for them to put some closure on their school year and their school career with us. So looking forward to that. I also wanted to give my thank you to the really large group that worked hard to get those petitions for the action tonight. Obviously, a strange situation to get in-person signatures and people figured out unique ways to do that, safe ways to do that. And that support, again, it's a hallmark of this district and one of the reasons why we're really lucky to all be part of this. So that's exciting and exciting times ahead here. So a huge thank you to that group, and we'll do some other things, send some thank yous as well. And then final, just kind of note here, did talk with the Altoona Area Chamber of Commerce this week, and they are planning to support our staff in back to school like they always do in whatever form that may look like. And so we talked a little bit about, we're not sure what that will look like, but they've got several different contingency plans to make sure that our staff know how important they are to the community. And I just think, again, that's just really nice and something that I want to single out and say thank you for. Beyond that, I won't bore you with my meetings. We all do a lot of this Zoom, but our focus has been on the 2021 school year and planning and all the things that go along with that in an extremely unique year. So with that, I take any questions.
Wow, nobody has a question.
All right.
Good for you. All right, our next item then, and Adam, I forgot to check in with you. I assume we haven't had any other comments.
No, we're good.
All right,
We're good.
great. 3B is the IASB COVID conference.
You bet, and that's me again.
Okay.
Yesterday, IASB held a virtual conference on all kinds of topics as it's related to the pandemic and this time, specifically board policies, human resources, legal, health and safety, continuous learning. Those were kind of the big topic areas and session areas. I have collected the handouts and the pieces with that, and I'll share that with you tomorrow to go through that. There's just a lot of things, obviously, and I think they've been doing a pretty good job of keeping us updated through emails and so on, of like different policies and things like that we need to make sure align with our policies now. And I know that Karen and the committee are working on that too, to get a time set where we can adjust those as needed. But it was an informative conference. It was well attended by people all across Iowa. And like I said, I'll share all those handouts so that you can take a look at what was there and get that information also.
All right. Any discussion on that, board? Questions? Okay, our next item for topics for discussion is 3C, return to learn and reopening. Is that you, Joe Ellen?
But once again, you're stuck with me to begin with.
All right. Okay,
So I'm letting Jason get things set here.
all right.
Perfect. You know, we wanted to take quite a bit of time tonight to discuss our return to learn plan and the proposal in more detail. I'll be joined in the presentation by each member of the cabinet, but the planning process itself included many more. The process actually started back in May. Oop. Is it bouncing around for you guys too?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's showing a message that the slide didn't load. Try reloading. Show anyway. Let's see. Maybe Joellen would have better luck after all.
Jason, do you want to try showing it with the grid view on the left-hand side, just keeping that small?
It defaults to full. Well, actually, I can just try. Yeah, I can just try this here.
Okay, or I
We
can
want-
I can present too, whichever you want me to do.
We can just flip through the slides this way if we want.
Okay.
Okay. Well, as I was saying, the process began back in May, and about 100 people were working on this, divided across 14 different work groups. These work groups were then divided into 3 main categories. That'd be the next slide, Jason. Infrastructure, health and safety, and teaching and learning. Each one of those bullet points represents a work group. And as you just look at that, obviously it's complex work, and most of those are interrelated in some manner. And so what we're going to do now is go through and give you the highlights of the products of each of those work groups, which will then also kind of delineate the specifics of the plan proposal as well. So I will turn it over to the next slide here. And Margie is going to talk about communications.
Good evening. In order to support the Return to Learn plan and communications, we are providing ongoing communication with school and community members as information is available. We're providing information about the plan by sending emails through Infinite Campus Messenger, posting information on our website, and on social media sites. We will be gathering feedback from our school and community members with the data from surveys and from information collected in our upcoming staff and parent learning sessions. And then as information is gathered, we will also provide a frequently asked questions document on our website.
Margie, are the surveys going randomized or are they going to everyone?
We're going to send it to all of our staff and students.
For the technology needs, we're going to be prepared to have a device for every student. Previously, we had devices for every 3rd grader through 12th grade. And with the assistance of some Facebook funds, we've been able to purchase devices for K through 2 students. We're also continuing to look at how we can better serve families in need with in-home internet solutions such as hotspots and internet providers such as Mediacom, CenturyLink, and others. And we're also focused on just being very adaptable with our technical support, whether that be in-person, remote support, kind of a hybrid of both, but willing, just a readiness to support not only our teachers and staff, but our students if they're at home.
Jason, can you go back to organizational needs? There you go. Okay. When we look at infrastructure and organizational needs, we had a work group that addressed some of the issues related to attendance and grading. And should we be in a virtual learning situation for the upcoming school year, one difference then, there are many differences, but one significant difference from how we had this last spring is that virtual learning would be required and attendance will be taken. So when we're in synchronous learning, obviously in a Zoom session or a Google Meet, we'll be able to take attendance. If we're in asynchronous where students are watching it on their own, we'll be identifying certain amounts of course progress that we would expect and embedding exit slips within that instruction so that we can take attendance that way. We're also working with a coding system within Infinite Campus so that we would be able to document and reach out to families to support the attendance for virtual learning. As well, since it is required, grades will be given. This lends itself well to the work that we've been doing with standards-based learning and learning progressions, particularly as we address the unfinished instruction and unfinished learning that we had from last spring, being able to identify where students are in their learning progressions and providing feedback to get them to that next level. So that will be part of our organizational system.
Joelle, I'm looking at the synchronous and asynchronous. Is there going to be a requirement of both, or is this two options that you were looking at for the type of attendance? What's the thought process there?
That's a great question, and we'll address it later when we get into the teaching and learning, but we are recommending both options. And we are studying that certain learning opportunities are best in a synchronous setting and some are best in an asynchronous. So we will have a balance and combination of both of them.
The health resources and support section of the plan, really all the yeoman's work was done by our school nurses, and I tip my cap to them. They've done a whale of a job, and they continue along this path, and certainly will be on an interesting road, you know, until such time as COVID-19 decides it's going to back off. But you know, from their work, they've identified that they looked at 4 different areas. Well, they looked at a lot more than 4, but the 4 main areas that are featured tonight are face coverings, well rooms, and sick rooms when it comes to going to the nurse, health services and procedures and policies. And then lastly, what does exclusion from school or absence from school because of COVID-19 look like, and how does that function? First topic, face coverings. You know, obviously this has been a nationwide conversation. And the work that they did really was heavily dependent on what was coming from the CDC, the Iowa Department of Public Health, and the Polk County Health Department guidelines. And from all that work, the district recommendation is that district recommendation is that all students and staff are required to wear a face covering, especially when social distancing cannot be achieved. And then if you're thinking about examples or want to see examples, those are given in the guidelines that are part of the big plan. We will, nurses and teachers and really the adults in the building will teach appropriate and proper use of face coverings as a public health mitigation strategies. And those things are already embedded into our PBIS matrices, you know, that positive behavior and intervention supports, you know, includes teaching kids, how do you wear a mask? Why do you wear a mask? Those kinds of things. And then lastly, under face coverings, understanding that not all students will be able to wear a face mask or face coverings due to medical conditions, you know, and those will all, you know, go through each nurse's office.
When we're discussing face coverings, are we talking about simply masks? Are we talking face shields? What goes into that definition?
I think it includes both.
Okay. So are we leaving, you may have this later on, but are we leaving that up to the decisions of the individual families, whether they choose to use face coverings or face masks or face shields? Is that going to be left to them, or are we going to have more specific input at some point in time?
What we're looking at right now, Adam, is we've purchased face shields for all of our employees. So if you can divide it into employees and students, we've got shields for employees, and then we'll be providing masks for everyone as well. We are still in discussions on shields for especially our younger students. Think preschool through second grade-ish, where masks can be difficult for all kinds of reasons. There's some research out there that shields are a better way to go there. And so that's something that we're exploring. But that's, I guess, the gist of things right now.
Okay. Thank you.
You know, I think the only thing I would add to that is there's a linguistics and facial expression element that sometimes a mask may cover up. And again, going back to some of the research that we've discussed as a cabinet involved the preference for certain language and reading teachers to have the face shield instead of a mask, so kids can watch mouths and watch how words and sounds are formed. You know, as they begin to discover, you know, more things that they don't know yet regarding language or language development.
While you're stopped there, Joe, I also wonder too, and maybe some thought's been given, English learners are going to kind of be in the same boat. They're older, but that linguistic part is obviously important.
Yep.
A quick question before you move on. So on the mask front, I've read some recommendations that certain circumstances like N95 or surgical masks in combination with a face shield would make sense. So are we going to kind of look at situational factors in determining some of those recommendations?
Sure, I would definitely. I would think so. You know, and then you start when you really kind of delve into the topic, you think about, well, what about if I'm a student and I'm alone on a playground and there's nobody within 6 feet of me? You know, maybe that's 5 minutes of going without a mask. So, you know, it's kind of like the two extremes there. You know, when would you use a face shield with an N95 mask, or a face shield with a cloth mask, or a mask, or no mask at all, or no face covering at all?
Mm-hmm. I think with that, we probably just need to be really clear on when that's okay and when it's not, and then what the proper way is to take the mask off and put it back on. I know there's CDC guidelines around that, but just to make sure somebody isn't touching the mask and touching their face and kind of negating the benefit of wearing a mask.
Right. I think that was part of the nurses. If you go back to the last slide, Jason, when we were looking at the instructional part of this, I mean, there is a lot of instruction required with students and face coverings about these very topics that our nurses have agreed, hey, we need to take this on. This needs to be a learning event for kids. You know, as the rules of school change, you know, and the rules of life as it is right now change. They want to be the proprietors of that information and the sharers of that information with kids.
Go ahead, Rick.
Mr. Horton, if this is going to come up later, I'll defer, but I'm so glad we're going to require masks. I think that's the right thing to do. But when it comes time to lunch, if we're back in school, are the kids going to eat in the lunchroom? Are they going to go eat in their classrooms? And at what point are they allowed to take off their masks?
Yep, that part is coming.
Okay, I can wait.
Okay, thanks.
Before we move on to that, one question I want to tack on. It was a chat that popped up as well. For those that are not wearing masks, are there additional procedures that are going to be undertaken for them as far as any type of extra checks or any types of extra rigor, or is it simply that they can't wear masks, so we just have to allow for that? What's the thought process there?
You know, I've been in now weekly meetings with Polk County Health, and that is a topic that is part of our discussion. And they have shared that they will give us some recommendations with that, because you do have things like a religious or a medical exemption there, where there's legal requirements, and how to make sure that we keep everybody as safe as possible. It's a good question.
Yep. I think you know, if I'm in a building, I would defer immediately to the nurse, and for the nurse to have a conversation with the family about, okay, we understand this is the, you know, your child will not be wearing a mask or face shield or, you know, any face covering at all. So let's problem solve and let's talk together about how this can work. You know, obviously we would feature, you know, along with kind of to give Rick a precursor to the answer regarding lunch, you know, I think we would have to have a real emphasis on social distancing and obeying that 6 feet, you know, for that particular student who doesn't have the mask, you know, which is delicate because, you know, you also don't want to ostracize the student, but at the same time, you want to keep that student safe and you want to keep other people around that student safe too. The nurse's office throughout the rest of the pandemic here is going to look a little bit different than it currently does. Every building will have 2 designated nurses' offices. One would be for ill children and one for children who are otherwise well, but need to take medication or take care of a chronic condition, basic first aid, you know, somebody falls on the playground, skins their knee, you know, that kind of thing. So as students would come in, the nurse's role would be to kind of triage those students and make sure that they're going to the correct designated nurse's office. There'll be a system in place to control foot traffic to the nurse's offices as well. And then nurses and health personnel will wear appropriate PPE, including shields, face coverings, gowns, and gloves, in particular in the sick room. The next area under health services involves procedures and policies. Just as the rule of thumb, the temperature threshold is 100.4 degrees per CDC recommendations. Any student exhibiting signs of illness will be required to wear a face covering and will be isolated until parent guardian can pick that student up. In order to avoid contamination, no food is to be brought to school except for the student's lunch. And, you know, obviously this would include basic things like no food, birthday treats, pizza parties, things like that. Individual water bottles are encouraged, and students may use the filling stations throughout buildings, and communal water fountains will not be available. And then lastly, proper hand washing will be taught and practiced several times a day, you know, not unlike the mask tutorials that our nurses are going to undertake and teachers will undertake with their students. Same thing with proper hand washing and opportunities to do that. Okay, the next section involves students' exclusion from school and or absence because of COVID-19. Once a student or teacher reports positive for COVID-19, we must then defer to public health officials and cooperate with their contact tracing efforts. Nurses will work directly with Polk County Health Department on illness monitoring and symptom reporting. Those are all mandates that have come to us from Polk County. We will ask parents to please report illness symptoms when calling into attendance. So they'll be having a conversation with likely an attendance secretary who picks up the phone each day. And then we don't want parents to be surprised by the idea that we're going to ask about, or those people will ask about, basic symptoms. And then the message to families, students, and staff, bottom line, is to stay home if you're not feeling well. If you're just not right, stay home.
I may be misunderstanding or just not understanding how this works. Specifically with a positive test, is that a requirement, or is there any type of requirement for an individual to report that to us, or do we get that from Polk County Public Health or anything of that nature, or is it just simply, I guess, hoping that if something like that were to occur, someone would report it?
Could be either way, but I'll say this: there's the hope part is not part of it, because when there's a positive test, the law requires that Polk County is notified of that by the lab wherever that test is being processed, and that then moves it from there.
Okay, so
Yep.
they'll notify us, so that there is actually a trigger mechanism that will guarantee that we get the results.
Correct.
Okay. I assume that any testing and anything like that is still going to be done through local providers, not through us, correct?
Yeah.
We don't have any implementation. We can't. Yeah.
We wouldn't know.
Okay.
Workplace cleaning and safety. Staff have been working in the buildings already. We have some workplace guidelines established by our nurses. Those are being followed, such as wellness check-in stations. We have employee teams also establishing specific guidelines for their work areas. We've collaborated with them to order supplies as necessary, everything from cleaning supplies to equipment to disperse those types of chemicals out there. We've collaborated with Gallagher Bassett, who's part of our IPSIP pool as consultants. We've heard, this is a new term to me, we've consulted with and continue to consult with an industrial hygienist when it comes to the health of our buildings. And we're collaborating with building administration too for signage and floor markings to make sure we are socially distancing based on the recommendations.
So Kevin, a couple questions. One, and if you don't have an answer to this, I understand completely. What's the turnaround time for us disinfecting our schools? Is that done each night? Is that done throughout the day? Do we have any idea on that as of yet?
It depends kind of on the plan that we choose in the end. We will definitely every night, depending on how these schedules go. If it's hybrid, those might be cleaned in between the different sections, between the different classes, but those specific plans are still being worked.
Okay. The second one, and as a parent, you know this too, one of the number one things that we contribute to classes each year is usually Clorox wipes. I assume that that's not going to be on the demand list this year because we're going to make sure that everything's properly stashed, yes?
We will have our hand sanitizer wipes, our sanitizer wipes available within the classrooms that meet the specs by CDC.
Okay, and we're going to be doing the same with hand sanitizer, I assume, as well?
Hand sanitizers will be available, correct?
Excellent.
We will encourage, or we will discourage our staff from bringing anything outside of what we provide from a district standpoint.
Okay.
One of our, I don't know if this is the right time, Gary, but one of our people from our chat is asking what happens if a student or staff tests positive.
I assume that's further down the rundown, yes?
But it was kind of in the nurses part, and I guess we answered it, but not with details for the next step. I guess that Polk County Health takes it from there. They do the contact tracing, and the answer is it depends. I mean, what they're going to look at is who that student was in close contact with, and remember, the close contact definition is within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes, and that would be with no mitigation factors. And as we're talking about, Joe's going to talk social distancing in a minute here, and we've talked about masks, so those would both be mitigating factors. So then it gets a little bit different, and that call is made by Polk County Health. but the student themselves would be quarantining for 14 days. And hopefully that would be the extent of that. But that's outlined very clearly in our plan in great detail by the nurses, those steps. Good question.
I got a quick question here, just since we're on the, so with the baseball team having freshmen through seniors cancel the whole season, because I think the concern too, and it may be answered, it may not, I don't know, but if it does, I can wait. The big concern is if one student in a classroom, does that mean the whole school shuts down, the classroom? And you said people within the vicinity, but how do we determine that? Because obviously people know the baseball teams and softball teams are ending the season because of one or two. So is that an appropriate time now, or did it make sense?
Is anybody else having lag there from?
Yes,
I couldn't hear
I
anything.
think the question that he had, if I pulled it, and Brett, I'm sorry if I got it wrong, shoot me a text if I get this wrong. But I think what he's saying is if one person in a class, it tests positive, does the entire class get shut down, similar to what happened with the baseball seasons for multiple schools? I think that's what the gist of what you're asking.
Yeah, because obviously you had freshmen through seniors, the whole team program shut down. Is it the school, is it the classroom, as Mr. Kolodnik alluded to, the people in range? So I guess it's kind of wide, what can actually happen? I mean, it could be everybody, I get it, but still having trouble hearing me, guys.
I couldn't hear, but if it's what Adam said, it kind of goes back to the answer that I just gave before. It kicks to the contact tracers with Polk County Health, and it's determined by the factors that the individual involved, who they were around, and would be considered a close contact. I mean, the way we're talking about setting up classrooms with social distancing and masks, that should be a very limited number, if any.
So question for you, and it's one of the ones that's coming from it. Is there a requirement if symptoms present for staff or for a student to the point where they are excluded from the normal and sent home, or the normal flow of their day and sent home? Is there a requirement for them to go get tested? What's the precedent there? Can we even require that?
Again, it seems to me that would be a Polk County Health thing, because the nurse and principal would be in contact with Polk County Health, and then they would take their guidance.
Okay, so let me back up just so that there's clarity here. We are in communication with Polk County Health, even if we have someone who has symptoms. So even if we don't have a positive test, we're still in contact with them because we have someone that shows symptoms. I'm
Yes.
getting a lot of nods yes, so that tells me what I need to know. So even if they choose not to get tested, they'll be prompted by Polk County Health to take some further measures.
Possibly, yeah.
Okay.
Whatever Polk County Health feels appropriate.
Can we keep going with the plan, and then if we get through the plan and there's still questions, can we, just so we are moving along? I know there's gonna be hundreds of questions.
Right, I think that's a good idea, Lori.
The next section kind of ping pongs back to me, and that's the social distancing work group, which was a collection of, I believe it was 8 of our 11 principals and myself. What came from that group, obviously social distancing is always remaining 6 feet away from other people. Building administration and buildings and grounds department actually are currently collaboratively creating and posting signage and floor markings for maintaining social distancing. For example, directions for active wellness checks, the designation of traffic patterns, the designation of exactly what 6 feet is. You know, that's always an interesting one to me, you know, and if I'm 6 or 7 years old, I don't know what 6 feet is, other than a 6 foot person is super tall to a person like me. And then lastly, for outlining face covering protocols. Only essential volunteers and visitors are allowed into buildings. They must complete active wellness checks before entering the building and must wear face coverings in areas where social distancing is not easily accomplished. I believe this is the last section involving social distancing. Staff meetings, staff development sessions, or other large group gatherings must occur virtually unless there's a space that could accommodate a larger group while still observing social distancing. Communications between pairs or among small groups of employees must include facial covering and maintaining a 6 foot distance. Those communications could occur more safely and or with increased confidentiality over the phone, via email or text, or through instant messaging.
Joe, I keep seeing the 6 foot mark. A lot of the recent notes from the Lancet study and everything else is that with proper precautions, face coverings, face shields, that number is actually closer to 3. Have we accounted for any of that? Or are we just sticking with 6 to be on the safe side?
Yeah, we have kind of stuck with 6 to be safe.
Okay.
I've got a quick question while you're still on the slide. So I think it's probably hard for a lot of people to imagine what that looks like in an actual classroom setting at the various levels that we have. So is that something that as we're communicating out with families and our staff, that we'd be providing maybe some examples of what that looks like?
Yes, and you know, that's a great question in and of itself, because you know, each building only has, you know, so much space, and the brick and mortar dictates so much. But how we use the brick and mortar, or maybe a better way to put it, is how we might repurpose the areas that we have that could be used appropriately will be a little bit different for each school, because we don't have cookie cutter schools, and we have varying numbers of kids in particular buildings, and the floor plans are different. So I think laying out what, and principals have been in the business of doing this here for a while, laying out what this would look like literally, much less than figuratively, has been a real challenge for them. But you know, it's been interesting to hear their ideas. We had a meeting not more than, it was about a week ago, I suppose. And Mr. Moaning from 4 Mile rolled out his vision for what these things look like. And I was blown away. I mean, only because I haven't been asked to think like that, you know, in that way, not being a building person. But it was really interesting to see how he very cleverly and very smartly has put 4 Mile together and what that might look like. And his comment was, "I hope I never have to use this plan." But it was really, really good and really well done, very thoughtful. So I think maybe even the live version of what, you know, if my child goes to 4 Mile, I would like to know how that's all laid out and mapped out. And maybe that's something our principals could share.
Yeah, I think that would be great. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, so, you know, based on the requirements of Iowa Code and the Department of Education, then we've created models for what learning pathways look like, what school model looks like. So we created on-site, online, and hybrid learning models. It's important to say that our plan was designed to be flexible because we realized that what we may plan to start in, we may not start in. What we do start in, conditions may dictate that we need to transition to a different plan at some point over the course of the school year as well. So there are 4 options. On-site learning, which is face-to-face delivery that includes the health and safety measures that you've been hearing about: facial covering, social distancing, additional sanitation, cleaning, and so on. Online learning, which is continuous learning delivered 100% online. This would be required learning for all students, not optional like we finished last year with. I'll call this one Hybrid 1, which would be a face-to-face delivery model that includes the health and safety measures, and then online learning for those who choose that as an option. Again, it would be required. The option is that they would be choosing online, not that it would be optional to do it. So that would be Hybrid 1. And then Hybrid 2 would be a model of an A/B schedule where we would have alternating days of some students learning in person and others then learning remotely. And that might look like this. If you were Group A, you would be in school on Monday and Thursday, and you would be learning online Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday. If you were Group B, you'd be in school Tuesday and Friday, you'd be online Monday, Wednesday, Thursday. So, yep.
What's the thought process with splitting the week as opposed to doing opposing weeks?
Because that Wednesday allows us another chance to deep clean and sanitize the building.
As opposed
so rather
to
than just on a weekend, that gives you 2 chances per week to do that.
Okay. There are, so far in the state of Iowa, schools that have announced their actual plan of what they're doing. There's some that fit all of these different 4 plans. On the far side, you've got Iowa City that's gone to online learning at least through October, or the first part of October, excuse me. Indianola has already announced that they intend to just go back to school, or at least that was their announcement a week ago, or 2, excuse me. And then of course, Des Moines has said that they're going to be doing the A/B schedule like you noticed, and West Des Moines is doing optional online if people choose, or they can opt into online only. Is there been any consensus that you've seen from other superintendents about what the best model is, or is it just kind of dealer's choice?
Yeah, I think that the conditions and the will of the community are kind of those 2 things combined. Probably fit that. And that just kind of takes me to my next point. We recognize that none of these options are perfect. There isn't anybody probably on this call period, on this meeting, that doesn't want to get back to our regular models and schedules. But the reality is that's not going to happen right now. It's just not an option. And it's not realistic. So like I said, we'll have to look at the environmental and health and safety conditions at the point in time, along with what we feel like we can actually accomplish as well. And then certainly we'll be putting all this information out about the models online tomorrow. And I encourage everybody to go out there and take a hard look at them, because we'll be following that up with a survey asking for feedback, input, and then specifically the preference for the model. And we'll be asking that for each child. So if you're a family with 3 different students, we'll ask that to be completed for 3 different times.
Well, and because you just alluded to families with multiple students, it kind of alludes into one of the questions that someone was asking earlier about if a family member has a positive test, what do we do with that? Now, I know it's a little bit sidetracked from this, but it does allude directly into that. So is that further down the rundown, or have we discussed that as of yet?
Tell me again what you're asking.
So you're talking about you might have 3 students, so you might have 3 different occasions. One of the questions I asked in one of the chats earlier was if one member of a family were to have a positive test or show symptoms, what effect does that have on the rest of the family?
Again, that's up to Polk County and the contact tracers. My guess is it would be quarantine for everybody that would be close contact. I don't know that family's specific situation to know whether they would fit the definition of close contact. So I'm not trying to be evasive. I just don't know. If it was our household, we'd all be quarantined because we'd be within the 6 feet for 15 minutes.
Quick question on the hybrid option 1, where families have the option of learning from home if they feel like they're not comfortable being in person. Would that be a semester long choice, or would that be something where you could go back and forth depending on the week?
Yeah, that's a great question, Chad. We would ask for a commitment, and I'm thinking maybe more like a quarter or a trimester, depending on the level of the student, rather than the full semester to begin with. But we would ask for a commitment and not to just flip back and forth. The only thing that would be different there is if it was, I'll just say like this, like sometimes we may have like a student breaks their leg and they, because they can't move around, they've got to be in traction or whatever, they need to be out of school for a few weeks. And so we work with families that way. So there could be a scenario like that where it wouldn't be the full commitment. But again, those would be individual and unique situations. If it was just because we feel more comfortable being online, then we'd ask for a commitment of a quarter or a trimester.
That leads us into some of our recommendations in regards to teaching and learning. And as we think about last spring, and we did have some unfinished instruction. So if you look at the top row there, we had quarter 1, 2, and 3 as normal. And then quarter 4, we had the COVID situation. And so one of the tendencies is to put quarter 4 at the beginning of the year and redo everything. But the problem is we don't have 5 quarters in a school year. And so we would still end up the school year 1 quarter behind. So our work groups and our work teams actually started this in May before school ended. And we looked at all of the priority standards that we had missed during quarter 4. And we embedded those and saw where they cycled through or spiraled through the curriculum and where we would need to provide support moving forward. So we have revised our scope and sequence to embed the missed standards within and across the year to provide additional support for unfinished instruction. As we look at our learning plan for next year, we know that social emotional learning and social emotional well-being will be a high priority. And as we created our plan, we embedded support for students, for staff, and for families. So we have planned within the instructional day opportunities for emotional check-ins, whether that be in a face-to-face setting or in an online setting. And we've also embedded many of those things into our social emotional learning curriculum. So as Mr. Horton had mentioned earlier, PBIS and some of those behaviors have embedded some of those things, as well as OVEUS in our class meetings and Mentors in Violence Prevention. So there will be very intentional social emotional efforts, as well as embedded into our curriculum that exists at this time. But it will be a high priority for us. Another area that we addressed was the area of equity. And so as we look at our plans for moving forward, what will that look like in either an online or a face-to-face setting as we work with students who might have special needs, as we work with students where English might not be their first language, as we work with our advanced and TAG students in the TAG program and students who are at risk. So working within all of those areas and finding the types of supports that would be needed. We have a number of resources as well as communication logs, and as before, more of a case by case and really seeing what the needs of those learners and their families are and working to address how we can support that. So as we look forward to that, what types of accommodations and support are needed in both the face-to-face setting and the online setting to help those learners meet their learning goals. Professional development will be a significant support provided. We know that this type of learning, as Dr. Halupnik said, it's not perfect, and it's also very new to us. That was at one learning webinar that we attended, said that they didn't consider what we did last spring to be distance learning. They considered that to be crisis learning. So now, as we have a little bit more lead time, even though we don't know what it looks like, how can we prepare ourselves better to address some of the changing situations that we will be facing? So as we worked with this work group, they shared that there are some types of learning that all teachers should have, and that would be our core professional learning. There are some types that would be differentiated. Students have teachers have different experiences and background. Some might need learning in Canvas where others are expert in Canvas. So we want to differentiate, and then we want the opportunity to learn from each other. So where our teachers have strengths, we'll have opportunities for them to work with their colleagues to be able to share their learning in those areas. So one thing that the work group shared with each other is that we can't wait until August to have this learning. So if we look at the next slide, we have already started what has been called Jumpstart PD. So there have been 12 online course modules created. 6 of those are in the core pathway and 6 are in the differentiated pathway. And they all have to do with the things that were mentioned before. They have to do with best practices for online teaching, how to do accommodations to provide equity, how to embed social emotional learning, just a number, they're all related to return to learn issues. So for any teacher who chooses to, that should say 3 modules. I apologize, I will fix that. There's a stipend for any teacher who chooses to complete 3 of the modules prior to school starting. And we just ramped that up this week. We just introduced it, I believe, on Tuesday or Wednesday. And already we have 180 teachers participating. So they are engaging in that professional development and will be able to get some of those things ready to go if that is the type of learning that we're engaging in. And then those modules are not only available before school, but they'll be available throughout the school year as well to meet district goals, building goals, or individual goals. As we think about professional learning, we know that is important moving forward. We also know from the slide on social distancing that if we are face-to-face, we're not going to be able to meet in the large groups like we had before to engage in that professional learning. So our proposal to you as a board is that for next year, we would, if we are on site, we would look at having professional release time every other Wednesday instead of every Wednesday. So right now we have every Wednesday early release at the elementary level, and we have 3 Wednesdays out of a month late start for secondary. That professional learning is incredibly valuable, and we are embedding that in different ways in regards to the online modules. But we also have to look at our learning time, as Joe talked about classrooms, and do some redesign. And we're going to have to look for some extra time to address some of the unfinished instruction from last spring. So we're going to have to increase that instructional time. And we are recommending that those late starts and early releases be every other week instead of every week, just for the next school year.
Dr. Latham, I appreciate that we're finally providing online training for our staff and giving them stipends to do it. I just think, I don't know how else to say this, but I think we're about 3 months late in giving this opportunity to our teachers. They should have been learning this last spring in preparations for the fall. I mean, all the reports everybody got, we're going to have issues this fall, and here we are, we're going to. And, last spring when they were still under contract, why didn't we start training our teachers how to teach online back then?
We did start some things with our Canvas courses and some of the things that we put out. Last spring was just a challenge to get through day to day, make sure our kids were okay, make sure our teachers were okay. And we did provide some professional learning for that, especially in May as we started to look to the end of the school year and wrapping up. People were pretty overwhelmed with the amount of workload that they had in regards to pivoting very quickly to going from face-to-face to an online model. So we wanted to embed the professional development in a respectful way that also allowed them time to teach. I think if you, as we go back to, we did embed some professional development for every Wednesday last year, particularly for guidelines and legal guidelines of what that looked like when we had learning platforms. And Jamie Gilchrist also did some professional development with school buildings on what it looked like and what kind of tools they could use. So you're right, it is an ongoing issue. Even as we get before the school year starts, it will be something that we'll need to continue as we move forward.
Jump in with a quick question, Joellen.
Sure.
Any thought to modifying our daily schedule to give our teachers a little bit more time for the online support?
In terms of when we're face to face or when we're
well, like just throughout like the school day. I don't know if we can carve out any time at all just for them to kind of complete some of those online tasks or do, you know what I mean? I don't know if we need 30 minutes a day, if we need 90 minutes a day, whatever we need as far as whatever we can give them a little bit of extra time just to help with the online.
So it depends on what pathway that we're in. We'll be able to carve out additional time. Like if we're in the hybrid model, the 8B structure, they would have that Wednesday that would be devoted to collaboration. So yes, as we look at our schedule, looking at opportunities to have not only that collaborative time, but the opportunity for online preparation. One thing I should mention as well is that we have something called a time day through Teacher Quality. That's an additional day of a contract day that teachers can choose to add. And that restarted again July 1st. So we are encouraging teams and teacher teams to meet prior to the school year so that they have additional opportunities to prepare.
In addition to that, I think I would add one thing, and that's having access to an instructional coach all day, every day. Sure. In terms of if we have people that are running into snags or they're bumping up against situations that are giving them a headache in regard to online learning and pieces like that, it's literally an email or a phone call away, and they can collaborate, work on those things together, and discover what it is that how to get over that hurdle. So I think there's a lot that's just it's almost like talking about something that's really super obvious, because that's usually the first place our teachers go when they get confused or they don't know something or they don't feel adequate online or whatever. That really is the first phone call. Or maybe it should be, or maybe we need to communicate that better with our teachers. If there are things they don't know about instruction or assessment or curriculum or any of these pieces, stop number one is with the instructional coach. So I think it's there. I think the opportunities are there. That's why I kind of chimed in. Sorry about that.
That's perfect. That's a good reminder.
I think it's a great point too, that we need to continue to think creatively as possible, no matter what model we're in, to provide those kind of opportunities for everybody. But definitely if it's the extra stuff for online and whatever, you know, whatever we do is going to be abnormal. And so there's got to be creative ways we can improve it too.
So pivoting a little bit, we've talked about a lot of things that we're doing to protect and allow for options for students. Jillian, can you talk a little bit about what we're doing for teachers that might have comorbidity issues or different things like that? I know I had some discussions with other boards around the city, board members around the city, and they were talking about ADA requests and that type of stuff, and maybe shifting those individuals to being online teachers specifically. What's our preparation look like for that so far?
Very similar to that. As teachers have those health concerns, they are meeting with our HR department to talk through that and see what kind of accommodations would be needed to support any of those challenges that they might have. In a hybrid model, we're not going to ask teachers to teach all day and then spend their evenings teaching online. So we will be working on developing a cadre of online teachers, and that could certainly be led by teachers who may have some health challenges that would not let them be in the classroom in a face-to-face model.
How has the there were quite a few teachers that were involved in this planning document, or this document trying to plan it. What was the reception? Were there any particular concerns, or what was the thought process? If you can speak to that.
To this particular section, or to the plan in general?
The planning phase in general, I guess, is more what I'm referring to.
Well, I can let the others chime in. I think, with the work, because I just worked with the work groups within the teaching and learning phase of that. And I think some of their challenges have been identified and asked questions, as parents have and as you have, is the unknown nature of it. And, as teachers, we are planners. We like to say, this is what's going to happen on this day and this day and this day. And it's really a challenge to plan for things that you don't know exactly what they're going to look like. So that has probably been the most prevailing concern. And as well as, I will say, the social emotional aspect of it, knowing that, there's been a lot of trauma that's been out there, and making sure that we can support our students, support our families, and support each other as we return to school.
Wonderful.
Well, that takes us to next steps. And I kind of referenced this earlier, but this is the information that we sent out yesterday of kind of where we go from here in the short term at this point. The plan description will be posted online tomorrow so that people can get out there and take a close look at it and digest it, and kind of get their own personal thoughts on things. Then we'll follow that up with a survey to parents starting tomorrow afternoon, and then the staff survey will go out on Monday, and then we'll have learning sessions for both staff and parents next week. We'll, like we mentioned, be building on the FAQs. We've got a nice, robust list tonight just from this discussion, along with other things that we've all been receiving over time. And then the ultimate plan right now would be that we'll be able to bring back a formal recommendation for that model at our meeting on August 6th. Again, that's assuming that we have any control of external factors, which we all know we don't. And so we've got to remain flexible and nimble, but at the same time, we can't not keep moving forward here as well.
So a couple of questions, and I've got a list of questions that people have submitted via chat, and I know, Joe, you've answered a lot of them, but I wanted to come into this. What should parents expect from that 7/23 session? Is that going to be a Zoom session? What does that look like?
Yeah, it'll be a Zoom session where we'll go through this, basically, go back through the details, and then try and do that very, very quickly, like 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and then dedicate time for people to ask questions just like this, and we'll have the right people on that Zoom to be able to answer questions that people have.
So that's okay. So good. So there'll be, so is there any consideration to possibly splitting that into 2 sessions? Because we are talking about possibly 10,000 parents, give or take, in our district.
Yeah, you know, we had not, just in consulting with other districts that have done some things like that. They felt the advantage of getting that all in one shot was better for everybody to hear the same thing, and make sure everybody could be there, so on. I'm not against anything.
Is that something that we'd be able to record and post out
Yes,
for people
yes.
that can't attend?
Right, so if you couldn't be there at that time, we'd keep it on our website for as long as we needed to.
Does anybody have any questions on this particular slide? Looks like there might be 1 slide left.
It's just credits for the
Okay.
graphics, so.
Okay. If you don't mind, I kind of ran with Gary on this one. There's a couple questions that came up that weren't answered that we might have some more information on. One of the first ones that jumps out is, how are we handling buses? And what happens if someone tests positive on a bus? Does it just go to Polk County Health for contact tracing? How does that function?
Well, if somebody tests positive on a bus, we would defer to Polk County. But as far as busing in general, we're looking at various transportation considerations in each one of our models. We started having conversations with some transportation staff back in June. We're going to continue to have those conversations on a regular basis moving forward. We've developed a return to learn transportation committee that's going to meet on a regular basis. As part of our committee, we're going to be talking about social distancing, drivers' thoughts on proper airflow considerations in the buses, procedures for handling students possibly exhibiting COVID symptoms, procedures and training for proper cleaning and disinfecting of the buses, and staffing considerations as well.
Okay. So one of the other questions happens, depending on if we go to a hybrid model of some form, that's not the optional. If we go to hybrid 2, for instance, the AB type of scheduling, how does Kids Club function?
You know, we would work with them. They're obviously their own entity, and they contract with us to use our building. So we don't really drive their programming. That's up to them. But my guess is they're going to set their programming to what we're doing, because that's the most logical thing for their business model.
Okay.
And they're a great partner.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. They have been for years. When someone shows symptoms and takes a test, there's sometimes a delay in them getting results, 72 hours, depending on what type of test and so on and so forth. What will be the requirements, or what will be the advice going into that? Are they required to stay out of school while they wait for positive, or wait for test results, positive or negative? What's going to be the precedent there?
Yeah, again, I mean, I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but anytime we have that kind of scenario, we're going to collaborate with Polk County Health, and they're going to give us the guidance of what needs to happen next. My guess is that there would be, some form of quarantine there. But again, not knowing details in a hypothetical like that, I can't answer exactly. And then we would communicate that on our end to anybody would be affected by that.
We've talked about, thank you, and you're not sounding like a broken record. It's true. We can't control what Polk County Health and what Department of Ed and so on chooses to do, so don't worry about that. We've talked about teachers, we talked about students. Is there going to be any foreseeable changes in the role of associates moving forward because of either A, shifts to online, or how does that function? Has there been any discussion around that?
I can address that one. Currently, and we're just starting right now, we are doing some IEP revision throughout the summer, so that as we start the school year, students' IEPs can be written to address either a online model or a face-to-face model in regards to what that looks like. So obviously in an online or a face-to-face model, the associates would be used as they see fit. So if in the hybrid model, they would work with the students who are in the face-to-face model. If we went to strictly online, that would be evaluated in a case-by-case setting. And as they are revising their IEPs, they are identifying what that associate role would look like.
And the one last question that I actually saw, and I apologize if I missed any. Let me check YouTube real quick. Well, there's a couple, but the one that I did see specifically was the models that we're discussing, those 4 models, are those intended to be district-wide K through 12, or are we possibly evaluating doing different models based on education level?
Yeah, that's a good question. At this point, the idea was for that to be district-wide.
Okay.
Yeah.
Has Polk County Health issue, or there's a couple more that have come up, and I apologize for jumping around on you. Has Polk County Health actually published any of their guidelines as of yet of what to do or expect if someone does have a positive test?
Yes, the Polk County schools have received guidance from the Polk County Health Department last week, I think.
Okay. And the last question, knock on wood, because nothing else has popped up yet, is if a teacher or an associate has a positive test come up, will that come from their normal sick leave, or are we doing something extraordinary because of the situation?
There's a Families First Coronavirus Response Act that provides leave. So the individual employees will work with Human Resources and we'll assist them with what leave they're eligible for.
Excellent.
I have a couple questions. This is the time for the board, I think, to ask questions. And one of those is on the staff survey. Are you going, well, and I don't even know how you, are you going to be surveying them on the interest of returning to online learning or in classroom learning, or do you already know that? And then the second part of the question is substitute teaching. Are we building up our supply of substitute teachers, or what's the plan for substitute bus drivers, kitchen help, custodial help for backup?
Sure, I'll take the survey question. Yes, we'll be asking the preference of the staff as well with the models. As far as the subs go, I'll be quiet.
We reached out to our certified subs, I believe, a couple weeks ago. So Jackie Kretz is gathering information there, and we're going to be reaching out to our classified subs as well. And we're working, like I'm working with the directors to, like right now, Dan is working on hiring more bus drivers, just like we would do in a normal year. So, you know, we usually hire bus drivers as subs and then find a shift and put them on as a regular driver. So we're proceeding with the same practices that we would normally do in that regard, because we're always looking for subs and trying to hire.
On the transportation topic, are we going to encourage, if we do in person every day, are we going to encourage those that are able to transport their kids to do so, or we're going to do something to limit, I guess, the number of children on a bus?
Yes, you know, depending on the model that we're in, but as we've talked about capacity, for example, if students are wearing face coverings, we could consider 2 riders per seat on the bus. On a 77 passenger bus, this would be about 50 students. So we would review our capacity, evaluate with the goal to keep as much space between the riders and drivers as possible. And then as we gather information through our surveys about the riderships, that'll help guide our decisions about our capacity. But the information that I've received from Dan, and he's available on chat if we need to ask him anything, is that with the 2 riders a bus, it's about a 67 loaded bus capacity at which he feels that he can meet right now.
I have another question. This one's for Dirk. Dirk, what's the absolute latest date? I know some other states have pushed back the start of school. Are you considering any of that, or pushing the start date back, or you're absolutely going to start on the 24th? And then part of that question is, if you start on the 24th, or whenever the start officially, you end up having it, if that's a movable, I know you said we're fluid. When will you make the final decision of whether to definitely go online at the last minute, or what's your last minute date that you're thinking, or is it all up in the air because of the climbing numbers?
Yeah, those are 2 great questions. The first thing I would say is anything, to me right now, I think anything's on the table. There's no absolute anything. I think we're fooling ourselves if we say that there is. That's just my personal opinion. And so to go down that road, if we were to delay the start of the school year, I'm not against that. I don't have any whatever, if that's the right thing for us to do. I just know that it would be like each day we didn't start would be like a snow day. So we would just have to make that up in June. Fine. I mean, if that's the payoff for being safe, we'll all choose that always. I mean, safety is going to be first. So, and then when is the last date line in the sand? That's maybe, I mean, I can't even tell you anymore. I can't even make the joke about keeping me up at night, because it's not even funny anymore.
Dirk's earning his salary.
That's debatable, but so I don't know. I mean, it's gonna be the factors in our community as we get closer to that time. And that's what's so hard. It's frustrating, and I've had conversations with parents just like this. It's frustrating for all of us, because we want to be able to say, okay, on the 6th, we're going to decide, and on the 24th, it's going to be this, and that's what it's going to be, because everybody needs to plan. I'm a parent. I raised 2 boys. I remember how stressful that is to make sure that daycare and everything is lined up for the start of school, so that everything, works in the family like it's supposed to. And so we have to honor that. But at the same time, I'm not going to sacrifice everybody's safety if the right thing is to make a call as it gets closer. But I obviously don't want to. I want to have some.
So if you had to wait until the 23rd of August, you'd make the call on the 23rd?
If I was, a call like that would be in collaboration with our local public health officials. And if they said, here's that, yes, I would. Do I want to? No. I want parents to have some planning time.
So Joellen, I wanted to dive into the learning plan a little bit more specifically, because some questions had come up that I've voiced with some others, and some parents have voiced with me. Are we looking at returning and teaching our full list of classes, or are there certain classes such as PE, band, chorus, ones that aren't conducive to either social distancing or using face masks? Are those going to be off limits, or how do we adjust with that?
There will be some adjustments. Part of what will guide that will be Chapter 12, which is the law that provides what kind of educational, what that pathway looks like. And the state has made it very clear that physical education requirements will still be in place. And so the Healthy Kids Act, those types of things. So we will be embedding those things. We know that the arts are very important to the education of our students and what that looks like. But we know that all of us are having to make sacrifices for what it looks like during the day. And so we'll have to make some sacrifices with that as well. Our goal would be to not eliminate anything, but perhaps reduce some things to create additional opportunities for the unfinished instruction from the core academic areas.
I have a couple questions. One was I read from a chat. It was, does everything we're talking about tonight include the harbor? Would be one thing I read from the chat. And this one's from me. What would cause it, assuming we choose one of the first three of our plans, the face-to-face or one of the two hybrids, what would cause our district to close down a school and go directly to remote learning if one school is infected pretty heavily?
Yeah, good questions. Harbor, yes. I mean, the harbor definitely be the same. And that second question, it would be if we had enough positive cases or potential positive cases as we're collaborating with the local health officials, that conversation back and forth, you know, we've talked about this and they haven't set, there's no line that's like exact, you know, but I know that one of the things that they look at in a normal illness is 10% attendance, or, you know, that 10% of your students are gone. I don't think it would take fully that in this case, but if it would be working in collaboration with the health department to make that call. And I think we would err on the side of being safe always. So that is a great question. And it's one that's, I don't think I'm in a meeting where that isn't discussed. And there just isn't they haven't come up with like a number or a percentage or a specific this to truly answer it.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I just have been asked that same question several times.
Me too. Yeah.
So at risk of being the unpopular guy, I'm going to bring up activities. How do we do any of our fall activities in the world of face masks and so on and so forth, and social distancing? Where have any steps been stated by any of the unions as of yet, as far as the boys or girls athletic union, or what is the stances as far as other conferences and such?
You know, the only thing that I've seen is a statement from I think it was the boys union, that they are working with the national union. I'm looking at Jason, just says there's a Zoom meeting tomorrow morning on the boys side. So I know they're working on this all day, every day. But we haven't received anything specific.
I guess one of the reasons I bring it up is because we're coming real close to when you'd usually start 2-a-days for football, or you'd start tryouts for pick your other activity. So it just kind of, in light of what happened with baseball seasons, not only for our own, but for several, just kind of is a little bit disconcerting. So.
Not to mention other activities. I know some of what you sent us as information, different activities were listed as high risk versus low risk.
Right.
Right. You know, music and other type of activities. So what's the line on those, do you think? Or when will decisions be made? Because, you know, all that stuff is starting or ongoing through the summer, some of it.
Right. You know, I anticipate we're going to hear very shortly from the boys and the girls. And I know there's a Zoom meeting with the music group tomorrow morning as well. So I know that stuff is coming to a head for just the reasons that we're saying we're starting to enter into that time frame where things would begin normally.
I can speak from experience on the band side because I live by the high school. This is the time they start the marching band practice, and I always like to be able to hear it. And I drove by the other night coming home from work, and they were out, a group of them. It wasn't the whole band. They were outside and spread out. And so, you know, they were trying to do what they could do to be safe and still do what they needed to do. So yeah, it's starting, I guess.
And there are certain activities that I think we'd be fine with. I think marching band, as long as they're always outside, it is probably close to that low risk environment, as is golf, as is tennis. But I mean, if anybody who's played high school football before, how do you tell a lineman who smacks face to face with somebody every play for 60 plus plays a game not to breathe when they're 6 inches from the other person? So I don't know how you have football at all, but I guess that's up to the unions to give guidance, and then we'll take it from there.
Right.
I guess that I don't know, almost like a staffing question as far as like our surveys for the parent and the staff. Are we embedding any questions in there to like kind of grab interest in who would be like a voluntary virtual learner versus an in-person? I'm just trying to guess like how we're going to gauge how many kids we're going to actually have in the building if we come back like split or, you know, voluntary virtual versus, and what we're going to do with our staff based upon that too, like who's going to be dedicated to virtual versus who's going to be dedicated to on-site.
Yeah, exactly right. We'll ask families to fill out a survey for each student, and one of those questions in there will be which of these models is the right fit for your family. So we'll be able to gather that data. Yes.
And then I guess two, like to go on with the harbor, are we going to like change their schedule as far as like to try to mirror the high school schedule and then maybe close down the open campus part of that? So I know they have a different lunchtime and, you know, the ability to leave campus and stuff. I think maybe
That's a really good question. I haven't been part of the conversations with the high school administration on that yet, but yeah, the open campus piece, I can't see that if we're not allowing, you know, non-essential visitors and so on, that the moving in and out during the day doesn't make sense. But again, I haven't been part of those conversations yet, so I'll find that out and get back to you.
Okay. And then what about like our door signage and stuff, just as far as like the mask requirement for people, visitors, and then maybe like the, I don't know, students and whatever only admitted, just so we have like that trespass capacity. I know, I think we had a trouble with not having those signs up where I guess we couldn't actually enforce that. But I don't know. And then we've talked about our doors too, I guess, as far as the coding. This might be a good time to kind of wrap all that into one.
Sure. Yep. But yeah, I think, I can't remember who talked about that, but that signage has been ordered, and they're in the process of getting that in place in all the buildings.
For the junior high and the high school, how do we handle passing periods?
I can take that if you want,
Sure.
Dr. Lupnick. You know, I think first and foremost, you know, with a mask requirement, I think that helps out a great deal. The other piece is principals are also working on not only what are we going to do with the spaces, but how are they going to be traveled? And there will be travel patterns right there on the floor, on the walls, or whatever. That'll help kids, you know, to kind of follow a pattern that'll allow them to try to stay as far apart from one another as possible. That's tough in a crowded school. But I think, you know, I think if the bottom line is if we have a route for them to go from A to B, and we're assistive in that process with kids and help them out, you know, they get used to a lot of stuff.
Is there any consideration to increasing the time for passing periods to allow for additional social distancing, or is the concern that would just allow for more socialization, especially after such a long layoff period?
One thing that's in the kind of the long plan is trying to stagger passing periods as well. So, you know, if we can not have everybody passing simultaneously, that may help out as well. You know, if we let kids, you know, I don't know, on the east side of the building out 3 or 4 minutes before the west side of the building and then flip it in the next period or whatever, you know, we can cut that simultaneous foot traffic in half. Although you'll get the whole foot traffic. It's just a matter of when they're traveling and where and how and in what direction. You know, we talked a lot about different businesses that we visited, and some of them do such an awesome job about, you know, this, you have to go this direction down this aisle and this direction down another aisle, kind of like a parking lot. And it really seemed to make a lot of sense to us that we could at least begin the process of trying to control some of the traffic so that it's not, you know, people going the wrong way down a one-way street.
How, so moving on from that, how do we enforce, we'll certainly have allowances for individuals who can't wear masks for medical reasons. What's the enforcement look like for those that don't have medical reasons? Is it going to be treated similar to like a dress code violation, or how does that function?
You know, it's interesting. I think in the beginning of the process, we talked a lot about teach, and then when you're tired of teaching, teach 3 more times. Because what we don't want to do is make this, you know, a gotcha.
Yeah.
You know, a long time ago, I used to work in a Catholic school, and we often had conversations about dress codes and haircuts and things like that. And there were those of us who kind of got on the teaching side of that conversation. And then there were others that kind of got on the punitive side of that. So it was always a delicate balance, and something that I think individual principals and their staffs, they do need to have that conversation about, you know, we're going to teach for as long as humanly possible until such time as it becomes a different behavior rather than just non-compliance with wearing a mask.
Okay.
You know, because it could get right down into defiance and pieces like that, at which time, you know, maybe some deeper levels of teaching need to happen in terms of helping them to understand why it's important to wear that mask. I guess that would be my first response.
Okay.
Since masks will be required, and maybe you already covered this, but are we going to provide, as a district, are we going to provide face masks?
Yes.
Yes.
I guess he's also asking, we're providing them for the staff. Are we also providing them for the students?
Yes.
Yes.
And are they cloth or disposable?
Cloth is what we're looking at, along, like I said earlier, with shields potentially for some age levels.
Okay.
I guess piggyback on that a little bit. Interesting question with staff clothing. Like, are we gonna, I suppose, give a little bit more allowance? I guess some people were talking about scrubs, as far as it's just they're worried about, you know, possible contamination as far as clothes, and just having something they can launder more readily.
You know, I think you said it was the question from the chat.
That was the second one I got on that. Yes.
The teacher and I had an offline conversation answering that question, and really the answer has been, you know, if these are things that you want to do, or you'd feel more comfortable in an environment where, I don't know, you had, like, my dad was a welding teacher for 30 years, and he always wore kind of like a shop smock kind of thing, because he burned up all his clothes, you know, over 30 years of welding. And so he would always wear that smock, you know, to protect, you know, the clothing that he was wearing. Now, this is a different time and a different set of situations, but I think the dynamics are the same. Where if a teacher wants to wear something, you know, like a scrub type thing, or a smock, or a lab coat, or something of that variety, it's an immediate yes from us. Yeah, go ahead. I mean, as long as it's, and it's not in disrepair and it doesn't look, horrible or,
Offensive.
otherwise objectionable, I say go for it.
So with the face coverings that are going to be provided, are the cloth ones they're going to be allowed to take home is one of the questions that's popped up for cleaning.
Yeah, they'll be given to the students and then they'll be their property.
And I assume the face shields will stay at the school.
Correct.
Okay.
I have a question. Mental health of the staff and the students. How are we going to step up that? Just based on how last year, the extra stress for all the students and the staff. How can we step up more support for both?
That's a great question, Lori. Been working with Amy Anderson, our at-risk coordinator, over the summer to put some things into place. And she's working with a group that includes some teachers and some of our school counselors. We have our EAP, Employee Assistance Program, and we're working with them as well as our Student Assistance Program and our on-site mental health providers. That's the question as to we need more mental health supports, but is this a time to be bringing them into the schools? We do identify them as essential, but they are able to do higher frequency with telehealth sessions. So looking to see what those might look like, especially through our employee assistance provider to provide those telehealth sessions. But part of our pre-service staff development is going to be about self-care, managing those types of emotions, different outlets that we can take and different things that you can put into your plans to take care of yourself and make sure, for some it might be at the breaking point, but to do as many things and be mindful of the things that will keep it from getting to that point as well. So we'll need to come at it in a number of different ways, but really explore all the options and services that could be available to support staff and students.
It's a great question and a great point. I mean, we've all been through trauma and we continue to, and we can recognize it in ourselves. So we know within our staff and students, it's there as well.
The next one I have is on lunch. Rethinking lunchroom and the food served and all of that. I know we kind of covered it a little, but what's the thought process, or how are things changing for lunch?
Right now, the strategy would be to serve lunch within the classrooms for the students to eat within their classrooms. As far as what we're doing and how to deliver that food, that's still being discussed, depending on, again, the option we choose. We are going to limit choice for sure, because that limited choice will kind of reduce the exposure to where students might be out there longer for periods of time. So if you imagine what we're doing now for grab and go meals, they won't look exactly like that, but the limitations of what we provide will be less than what they had before.
With that in mind, for the grab and go meals, for those that choose to do an online option, assuming we do some type of hybrid, for the days that they're not in school, or if it's completely online, will there still be grab and go options for those individuals, or do they not have that option because they've chosen online?
That will be part of our survey as we send those things out. What we do know from the Department of Education so far is that if they do choose that lunch to be served while they're at home, we still have to follow the free reduced guidelines. So those people that pay for lunch would still need to pay for those lunches that go home, different than what we're doing right now for summer grab and go. I do know that Director Amy Ahern has talked to, and we're waiting to see if there's a universal free lunch for all schools within the United States because of the pandemic. But again, that guidance is yet to come down.
Were you speaking earlier, or was someone speaking earlier to the fact that we're starting to look at alterations for IEPs or 504s based on necessities to wear masks versus face shields? And I know you talked about having face shields for certain levels of education. Are we also going to make sure that they're available for those? I assume we have to, if a 504 IEP requires it.
Yes, we've been actually, some parents have been contacting us with concerns and asking if a face mask isn't conducive, then would a face shield work, and working through that. I know that we're looking at ordering some face shields. They're a little bit more of a challenge to get in the child size, but we are currently in the process of getting those secured and getting that to happen.
Thank you, all of you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. And I guess there was one more quick question, or halfway quick. I guess the biggest thing that worries me is the whole contact tracing. So I don't know if we could have a discussion with Polk County and just say, hey, here's what we're doing for mitigation strategies. Here's what our classrooms look like.
Yep.
And then kind of get their view as far as how they're going to do it. Because that's the biggest or easiest way to lose the largest population, is to say, you know, all the kids in this room are responsible, or all the kids in here are going to go and quarantine.
Right.
So,
That's why all those mitigation strategies are so important, and it's so important that we follow them, so that just what you say doesn't happen. I can tell you this, and tell everybody this, that Amy Chebahar, our lead nurse, is meeting. She's in a work group with all the Polk County Health Department officials. They meet weekly to go through all these kind of things, and they're also now pulling us as superintendents in once a week to give us both updates on what the scenario is in Polk County or Central Iowa, and then also walking through a lot of these kind of questions on what happens with COVID-19 infections. So those are all great points. Some of those things we know specific, some of them we're still learning as they're telling us. I think they're also figuring out the procedures as well, because just like it changes for us, it's changing for them as well, and what they learn.
So it sounds like we're winding down to the end of our questions. So something that I feel that is important that just our community know is that this is, as you've said, Dirk, is always evolving. So we could have a plan on the 6th when our next board meeting is, and then on the 7th, the Department of Ed could come in and say, this is what you're doing, period. So just, you know, bear with us. And then even when school does start again, the online won't be like it was during the spring, because it'll be required, and school in person will not be what you think it is, or what you remember it is. It's important to bear that things are going to change. And as a parent, we've been trying to tell that to our kids. And I think even though they hear it from us multiple times a day at this point in time, they're still having trouble coming to grips with what that actually means. So patience, please.
Yep. Here's a great example. During this time that we've been talking here, I received an email that my 10 o'clock meeting was bumped because the governor's holding a 9:30 press conference to deal with public education. So who knows what rules change tomorrow that based on our whole conversation tonight. Hopefully nothing changes. Well, that's wrong. You know what I mean.
Yeah, I think
Well,
these are all
hopefully it
good.
changes for the better.
The thing that I would tell the community members that are listening, and I know all the board members, we all have different, contacted by different people. Emails oftentimes are sent to all of us. I know many of us, and probably all of us, read all of them. I don't respond to all of them. But one thing that's been apparent to me in, you know, looking at those and discussing it, that there are so many nuances. I don't think, I've received several. I don't think any two are quite alike. I think two were sort of alike because they looked very similar. But other than those two that appear to be the same work product, there's a different nuance to all of these. And so I think there's a wide variety of opinion, position, and I want to thank our team for doing the hard work of trying to put this all together. And you think you've got where you're at, and then life happens and it changes, and you've got a press conference in the morning that may change everything again. And 3 days from now, it may change from that again. So I think everybody has to stay flexible and fluid. And, you know, we're all hoping that we can get school back on and have it resemble as close to usual as possible, as soon as possible, but it's a Herculean task for everyone. So thank you all staff for doing the hard work. Any other questions from the board? All right, that's covers that topic for discussion. Our next item, we do have one more item for the meeting, and that's item D under our topics for discussion is roof security and asphalt projects update. Gary out there somewhere, I assume that's his.
Yes.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I'll start my report out, slow the train down a little bit. Roofs, I completed the final walkthrough inspection of the roof replacements at the junior high, senior high, and Altoona Elementary on July 8th with Academy Roofing and Shive Hattery. I found the roofs to be in great order, including workmanship and material, and I have approved the final pay application for those projects. Next was our security entrances. I did our 11-month walkthrough inspection with Estes Construction on Monday, July 13th. There are a couple items that still need to be repaired and touched up, and I'm still holding the retainer on those projects at this time. Asphalt replacement was held back one day this week. They did start that today on our frontage drive at 80th and Spring Creek. They did get it all ground out. They're going to full depth of 7 inches, and it should be completed tomorrow on the 17th instead of the 16th. We're also started the concrete replacement at our newest north parking lot at the senior high school today. They got all the damaged parts out, and I noticed this afternoon they were even starting to fill the areas that were replaced with concrete today. So I'm anticipating completion on those in the near future. That concludes my report. If you have any questions, I would be more than happy to entertain those.
Lori, is your microphone not working?
I was thinking, but I really don't have any questions today. I'm glad to hear that the roofs are done and things are coming into play from the summer work. So, and how are they coming with all the buildings, getting them prepped for the beginning of the school year?
Very well. They're doing an awesome job this year. We'll be ready for school to begin, and everything will be sanitized, disinfected, which we're doing as we go anyway. And so we have everything in place for the startup.
Gary, even dividers.
Dividers are ordered, but they're not here yet.
Okay, I didn't know what the extent was in the buildings or where adaptation has to occur yet. So, in all the
What do you mean by dividers? Is all those plastic things?
yes, or yes, things like
Okay.
that.
Yeah, okay.
Classroom wise, or I know we saw in some different countries they had little desk shields built around each elementary desk. So I didn't know the extent of what they were doing.
The extent that I'm aware of right now would be strategic places, maybe teachers' desks, front desk areas. There'll be universal type panels, so they can be used wherever they feel that they're needed or required.
All right. Any other questions? Well, I'm somewhat amazed, but I think that concludes our agenda items. Anything else, anyone, before we would adjourn? All right, we'd entertain a motion. What's that?
All rise.
Oh, yeah, no kidding.
I make a motion that we adjourn.
All right, time
Thank
to
you.
adjourn.
Thank you for
everyone.
everything.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Gary.
Gary, thanks, everybody.